Marcus Chen had always prided himself on being a reasonable neighbor. In the 3 years since he moved into the quiet suburban development of Willowbrook Estates, he kept his lawn pristine, his fence painted, and his interactions cordial. That was before Linda Pemberton decided his backyard was her personal highway. It started on a Tuesday morning in late September. Marcus was enjoying his first cup of coffee on the back deck when he heard the unmistakable growl of a luxury engine cutting through the peaceful morning air. He looked up from his newspaper to see a gleaming white Range Rover barreling across his carefully maintained lawn, leaving deep tire tracks in the still damp grass. The SUV belonged to Linda Pemberton, the self-appointed queen bee of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. At 52, Linda wore her HOA board position like a crown, wielding her clipboard and measuring tape with the authority of a general commanding troops. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair never seemed to move even in the strongest wind, and her designer athleisure outfits cost more than most people's monthly rent. Marcus watched in stunned silence as Linda's Range Rover carved a muddy path from the corner of his property, straight across his backyard and through a gap in his rear fence that led to the main road. It was a shortcut that shaved exactly 47 seconds off her drive to the country club. Marcus had timed it after the 5th incident. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, driving across his lawn as Linda's vehicle disappeared through the gap. But she was already gone, leaving only the acrid smell of exhaust and a set of tire tracks that looked like scars across his formerly perfect grass. That evening, Marcus knocked on Linda's front door. Her house sat on the corner lot, a sprawling colonial with enough square footage to house a small village. Linda answered wearing tennis whites and an expression of barely concealed annoyance. "Marcus, isn't it?" she said, not inviting him in. "What can I do for you?" "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus began diplomatically. "This morning and several times before, I've noticed your car driving through my backyard. I'm sure it's just a mistake, but—" "Oh, that little shortcut?" Linda waved her hand dismissively. "I spoke with the previous owner about 2 years ago. It's perfectly fine." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "Mrs. Pemberton, with all due respect, you're driving across private property without permission. The previous owner sold the house to me, and I'm asking you to please use the actual roads." Linda's eyes narrowed. "Listen, Marcus. I've been on this HOA board for 8 years. I know every easement, every property line, and every covenant in this neighborhood. That little strip of land has always been a community access route." "Do you have documentation of that?" Marcus asked. "I don't need documentation. I am the documentation." Linda's voice rose slightly. "Besides, you should be grateful. My shortcut helps me respond faster at HOA violations. Just last week, I caught the Hendersons with their garbage cans out on the wrong day." Marcus stood there, coffee mug still in hand, processing the sheer audacity of what he just heard. Linda Pemberton wasn't just trespassing. She was trespassing with the arrogant confidence of someone who believed rules simply didn't apply to her. "Mrs. Pemberton, I'm going to ask you one more time politely. Please stop driving through my yard." Linda smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. "Or what, Marcus? You'll report me to the HOA." She laughed. "I am the HOA." As Marcus walked back to his house that night, he had no idea that Linda Pemberton had just made the biggest mistake of her perfectly manicured life. The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of his sprinkler system running at 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes earlier than usual. He stumbled to his kitchen window and immediately saw why. Linda's Range Rover had torn through his yard again, this time clipping his sprinkler head and sending a geyser of water shooting sideways across his driveway. Marcus threw on clothes and rushed outside to shut off the water main. As he knelt in the mud, wrench in hand, he could hear Linda's voice carrying from 2 houses down where she was berating Mrs. Chen about her rose bushes being 3 inches too tall, according to Covenant Section 4.27. That afternoon, Marcus did what any reasonable person would do. He called the police. Officer Rodriguez arrived within an hour, a patient man in his 40s who'd clearly dealt with neighborhood disputes before. "So she's been driving through your yard without permission?" Officer Rodriguez asked, taking notes. 6 times in 2 weeks, Marcus confirmed, showing him photos of the tire tracks and the broken sprinkler. "I asked her to stop, but she claims there's some kind of easement." Officer Rodriguez walked the property line with Marcus examining the damage. "I don't see any recorded easements in the county files," he said. "But for trespassing charges, we need to catch her in the act or have video evidence. Have you considered installing cameras?" Marcus hadn't, but he liked the idea. That evening, he ordered a security camera system online and scheduled installation for the weekend. Meanwhile, Linda wasn't just continuing her trespassing, she was escalating it. On Thursday, Marcus came home from work to find her Range Rover parked diagonally across his lawn, while Linda stood on his back deck, peering through the sliding glass door with her hand cupped against the glass. "What are you doing on my property?" Marcus demanded, marching across his yard. Linda spun around, clipboard in hand. Routine HOA inspection, she announced. We've had reports of potential covenant violations. Reports from who? Anonymous concerned neighbors. Linda's smile was all teeth, no warmth. I'm documenting potential structural issues with your deck railing. A stained color appears to be non-compliant. Marcus looked at his deck railing, which was the exact same color as every other deck in the neighborhood. Linda, you can't just walk onto my property whenever you want. Section 8.4 of the HOA covenants clearly states that board members have access rights for inspection purposes, Linda replied, not looking up from her clipboard. Show me that section. I don't carry the entire manual with me, Marcus, but I've been doing this for 8 years. That weekend, while Marcus was installing his new security cameras, Linda struck again, but this time she brought reinforcements. Marcus looked up from mounting his third camera to see Linda's Range Rover followed by 2 other vehicles, a silver BMW belonging to HOA treasurer Janet Walsh and a red Audi driven by board secretary Tom Bradley. All 3 vehicles drove single file through Marcus's yard like it was their personal parade route. Marcus's hands shook slightly as he finished installing the camera. The lens had a perfect view of Linda's shortcut path. Sunday evening brought the final straw. Marcus was grilling dinner on his back patio when Linda's Range Rover came roaring through his yard. But this time she wasn't alone. Her granddaughter, who couldn't have been more than 16, was driving. The teenager took the turn too fast, spinning the wheel and sending the Range Rover into a small skid that tore up another section of lawn and knocked over Marcus's newly planted maple sapling, a memorial tree he planted for his father who'd passed away the previous spring. Marcus watched the $400 tree line broken in the mud, its roots exposed, and felt something cold settle in his chest. He tried being reasonable. He tried being polite. He followed proper channels. Linda Pemberton had just destroyed something irreplaceable. As he knelt beside the broken tree, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. If Linda wanted to use his yard as her personal road, then he was going to give her a road she'd never forget. Marcus spent that Sunday night researching everything he could about property rights, HOA regulations, and legal landscaping modifications. By 3 a.m., he had a plan that was both perfectly legal and absolutely diabolical. Monday morning brought Linda's predictable 7:15 a.m. drive-through, captured in crystal clear HD by Marcus's new security cameras. But this time, Marcus was ready. He stood at his kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching Linda's Range Rover plow through his yard while he mentally measured distances and angles. After Linda disappeared through the gap in his fence, Marcus walked outside and began marking the path with small orange flags. 43 feet from entry to exit. The tire tracks showed Linda always took the exact same route, the path of least resistance across the flattest part of his lawn. That afternoon, Marcus paid a visit to Henderson's Hardware, the family-owned store on Main Street where old Pete Henderson had been solving neighborhood problems for 30 years. I need to do some landscaping, Marcus told Pete, sliding a hand-drawn diagram across the counter. Specifically, I want to create a natural drainage system across my backyard. Pete studied the diagram, his weathered face creasing into a knowing smile. Drainage, huh? A lot of rain lately. Terrible flooding issues, Marcus agreed solemnly. I'm thinking a series of decorative drainage ditches, maybe 18 inches deep, 2 feet wide, filled with river rock and bordered by those beautiful landscape timbers. Course, you want to camouflage it real nice? Pete nodded. Maybe some of that artificial turf on top make it look natural. Wouldn't want anyone to accidentally drive over it. Exactly. Safety first. Pete's grin widened. I like a man who thinks about drainage. When do you want delivery? Tomorrow morning. Early. While Marcus was at the hardware store, Linda was holding an emergency HOA board meeting at her house. Janet Walsh and Tom Bradley sat in Linda's pristine living room, sipping wine and listening to their fearless leader's latest grievance. Marcus Shen is becoming a problem, Linda announced, pacing in front of her floor-to-ceiling windows. He's installed surveillance cameras clearly designed to spy on board activities. This represents a clear violation of privacy expectations outlined in Covenant section. Linda, Tom interrupted gently. Aren't those cameras pointing at his own yard? The intent is obviously malicious, Linda snapped, and now he's filed some ridiculous complaint with the county about property easements. The audacity. Janet shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should just use the front entrance to the country club. It's only 47 seconds longer. Linda's eyes flashed. It's not about the time, Janet. It's about precedent. If we let one homeowner dictate terms to the HOA board, where does it end? Next thing you know, people will be painting their houses unauthorized colors and planting non-approved shrubs. The horror in Linda's voice suggested this was roughly equivalent to societal collapse. I think we need to send a message, Linda continued. Tom, I want you to review every inch of Marcus Chen's property for violations. Janet, check his compliance history. I want documentation on everything: paint colors, mailbox height, grass length, fence staining dates. Linda, this seems a bit, Tom began. Thorough, Linda finished. This is what thorough looks like, Tom. This is why I've been board president for 4 consecutive terms. By Tuesday morning, Marcus's backyard looked like a construction zone. The delivery truck for Henderson's Hardware had arrived at dawn, along with Pete's nephew Danny and 2 other workers. They spent the morning digging a carefully planned series of trenches exactly where Marcus's orange flags marked Linda's usual path. To any casual observer, it looked like legitimate landscaping work. The trenches were professionally dug, properly graded for drainage, and lined with protective fabric. River rocks filled the bottom, topped with a layer of sand and soil. The masterstroke was the artificial turf, premium quality synthetic grass that perfectly matched Marcus's lawn. From even 10 feet away, the drainage system was completely invisible. Marcus stood back and admired the work. To anyone walking by, his yard looked exactly the same. But Linda's shortcut had become something entirely different. At 6:30 p.m., Marcus received a certified letter from the HOA. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and bore Linda's signature across the seal. Inside were 14 pages of violation notices covering everything from his non-compliant mailbox positioning to unauthorized security camera installation. Each violation carried a $200 fine. Marcus read every word, then walked to his back deck and looked out at his innocent-looking lawn. Hidden beneath that perfect green surface lay his own form of justice, waiting patiently for morning. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel sharper, more focused. Marcus positioned himself at his kitchen window at 7:10 a.m. with his phone ready to record and his coffee growing cold in his trembling hands. 5 years of engineering project management had taught him that the most satisfying moments came when careful planning met perfect execution. At exactly 7:14 a.m., Linda's white Range Rover appeared at the corner of his property like clockwork. Marcus watched her approach the usual entry point, noting her aggressive acceleration. Linda always gunned it through his yard as if speed somehow made her trespassing more justified. The Range Rover hit the first section of artificial turf at approximately 15 miles per hour. What happened next was both exactly what Marcus had planned and more spectacular than he dared hope. The front wheels broke through the synthetic grass and dropped into the carefully engineered 18-inch trench with a sickening thud that Marcus felt in his chest. The Range Rover's momentum carried it forward until the rear wheels followed, and suddenly Linda's luxury SUV was sitting axle-deep in what appeared to be a perfectly innocent drainage ditch. Through the security camera footage later, Marcus would see the exact moment Linda's face changed from entitled confidence to pure shock. Her mouth formed a perfect O surprise as the steering wheel jerked from her manicured hands. The Range Rover rocked back and forth for a moment, its expensive all-terrain tires spinning uselessly in the river rocks and sand. Linda revved the engine, producing nothing but a high-pitched whine and the smell of burning rubber. Marcus stepped onto his back deck, phone in hand, and called out in his most helpful neighbor voice, "Everything okay over there, Linda?" Linda's window rolled down with an electric whir. Her perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and her face had turned an interesting shade of red. "Marcus, your yard, there's some kind of hole." "Oh, well, that's my new drainage system," Marcus replied cheerfully, walking closer. "Sorry, I should have put up warning signs. Are you hurt?" "Drainage system." Linda's voice climbed an octave. "You can't just dig holes in your yard without HOA approval." Marcus pulled out his phone and began recording. "Actually, Linda, landscaping improvements on private property don't require HOA approval according to Covenant Section 3.14. I checked very carefully." Linda tried to open her door, but it was pressed against the side of the trench. She was effectively trapped in her own vehicle. "This is deliberate. This is entrapment. Entrapment would require me to encourage you to trespass on my property," Marcus said mildly. "I believe I specifically asked you not to drive through my yard." By now, the commotion had attracted attention. Marcus could see neighbors emerging from their houses, coffee mugs in hand, drawn by the sound of spinning tires and Linda's increasingly frantic voice. Janet Walsh appeared first, driving across the street in her yoga pants. "Linda, what happened?" Marcus dug a trap in his yard. Linda shouted through her passenger window, which was the only one she could fully open. "I installed a drainage system," Marcus corrected. "There's quite a difference." Tom Bradley arrived next, followed by the Hendersons, the Paddles, and at least 6 other neighbors. Marcus noticed several of them were trying very hard not to smile. "Can you call a tow truck?" Linda demanded, her authority diminishing with each passing minute as more neighbors gathered to witness the HOA president trapped in a hole in someone else's yard. "Of course," Marcus said, "but first I should probably call the police. There's been another trespassing incident on my property, and I have it all on video this time." Linda's face went pale. You can't. This is clearly a setup. The setup was legal landscaping on my own property, Marcus replied. The trespassing, however, is not. Officer Rodriguez arrived within 20 minutes, the same patient man who'd taken Marcus's complaint weeks earlier. He surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen every possible neighborhood dispute. So the vehicle is stuck in a drainage ditch on your property? He asked Marcus. That's correct. As you can see from my security footage, Mrs. Pemberton drove directly onto my property without permission, just as she's been doing for weeks. Linda tried to interrupt from inside her trapped Range Rover, but Officer Rodriguez held up his hand. Ma'am, I'll need to speak with you once we get you out of there. The tow truck took 45 minutes to arrive and another 30 minutes to extract Linda's Range Rover from Marcus' perfectly legal drainage system. The entire neighborhood watched as the expensive SUV emerged from the trench, its pristine white paint now decorated with mud and scratches. As Linda finally stood on solid ground, Officer Rodriguez approached with his citation book open. Mrs. Pemberton, based on the video evidence and witness statements, I'm issuing you a citation for criminal trespassing. Marcus felt a warm satisfaction spread through his chest as he watched Linda Pemberton, for the first time in 8 years, at a complete loss for words. The aftermath of Linda's expensive tumble into Marcus's drainage system rippled through Willowbrook Estates like a stone thrown into still water. Within hours, the security camera footage had been shared in the neighborhood Facebook group, where it accumulated 247 likes, 89 comments, and 56 shares before Linda demanded the HOA board take emergency action against social media harassment. The emergency HOA meeting that Thursday evening was unlike any in the subdivision's history. Instead of the usual handful of reluctant attendees, Marcus's living room was packed with 43 neighbors, many of whom had never bothered with HOA politics before but suddenly seemed very interested in drainage systems and property rights. Linda arrived 15 minutes late, her Range Rover still bearing mud stains despite an expensive detailing. She walked to the front of the room with her usual clipboard, but something fundamental had changed. The neighbors who'd once nodded politely at her proclamations now watched her with barely concealed amusement. This emergency meeting concerns the malicious property modifications made by Marcus Chen. Linda began, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Clear violations of sections 4.2, 6.7, and 8.1 of our covenant agreements. Marcus stood up calmly. Point of order, Linda. According to the HOA bylaws, any board member facing criminal charges must recuse themselves from decisions involving their accusers. A murmur ran through the crowd. Linda's face flushed. That citation is being contested through proper legal channels. Until it's resolved, you can't preside over HOA matters involving my property, Marcus continued. I have copies of the relevant bylaws for anyone who'd like to review them. Tom Bradley cleared his throat. Linda, he might have a point. Maybe Janet should chair this meeting. What followed was the most therapeutic HOA meeting in Willowbrook Estates history. Neighbor after neighbor stood up to share their own stories of Linda's overreach. Mrs. Patterson described receiving violation notices for having the wrong shade of beige trim. The Hendersons detailed being fined for their garbage cans being 6 inches from the approved position. Young couple Sarah and Mike Chen, no relation to Marcus, explained how Linda had tried to ban their vegetable garden because tomatoes weren't aesthetically consistent with the neighborhood vision. Janet Walsh, taking minutes, looked increasingly uncomfortable as the testimonies piled up. By the time the last neighbor finished speaking, Linda Pemberton looked less like an HOA president and more like a defendant in her own trial. I move to table any discussion of Marcus Chen's landscaping pending legal resolution, announced Mrs. Henderson, whose roses had been the subject of countless violation notices. Seconded, called out Tom Bradley. The motion passed 41-2, with only Linda and her loyal secretary voting against. But the real satisfaction came 3 weeks later when Marcus received a certified letter, not from the HOA this time, but from Linda's insurance company. The letter was brief and to the point. They were denying her claim for vehicle damage because the incident occurred during the commission of a crime, criminal trespassing, on private property. The repair bill for Linda's Range Rover came to $3,247.83. Meanwhile, Marcus's 14 HOA violation notices mysteriously disappeared from the official record. Tom Bradley, who'd been quietly documenting Linda's retaliatory enforcement patterns, presented his findings to the HOA board. Within a month, Linda Pemberton was voted out as president in a landslide election that saw the highest voter turnout in subdivision history. Marcus spent his Saturday morning planting a new memorial tree for his father, a sturdy oak that he positioned with a perfect view of his famous drainage system. As he patted soil around the roots, he could hear children playing in the Hendersons' backyard and smell barbecue smoke from the paddle's deck. The neighborhood felt different now, lighter somehow. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his new neighbor, Dr. Williams, who just moved into the house 3 doors down. Love the landscaping. Any chance you could help me design a drainage system for my front yard? Having some issues with people cutting across my lawn. Marcus smiled and typed back, happy to help. Sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. As he walked back to his house, Marcus glanced at his security camera and waved. The little red recording light blinked back at him like a satisfied wink. Some traps, Marcus reflected, were really just good engineering disguised as karma.